Let me kick off recording. So we installed 3 things yesterday, and it felt like a whole heck of a lot more than that, right? So we started with the Xcode developer tools. That was the Xcode select -- install. That is kind of what Apple provides. Xcode is like VS Code, but Apple's version of it. And Xcode is what kind of at the operating system allows developers to be able to run certain tools. So we started out with Xcode because in order for Homebrew to work, we need those developer tools that Apple provides. Then we installed Homebrew, right? And Homebrew is a what we call a package manager. We'll be learning about NPM, which is Node's package manager, a little bit later on in the course. But a package manager is just a repository of different packages, different applications that we can use to develop programs, right? And so Homebrew is the go-to dominant package manager for the Mac that allows us to install usually terminal-based tools without having to individually go to all of those different websites and install the tools. So Brew is, if you want to think about it, this is an oversimplification and not always true, but Brew is basically the installer for terminal-based tools. And then finally, we installed Node.js. So you will commonly hear Node referred to as just Node, not Node.js or Node.js. They're referring all to the same thing. And basically, Node.js most commonly is a way that we can execute JavaScript on servers. And so that's what we will be using Node for later on in the course, is writing some JavaScript that will execute on a server. However, I think it is a little bit confusing to start learning JavaScript in the browser, because then you're layering on HTML and CSS on top of that. And I find that to be a little bit harder to wrap your head around because it doesn't exist in a vacuum. And so that's why we installed Node, so that we could point it at some JavaScript we were writing and say, hey, go run this code. And what we found in the terminal was that it only ran whenever we went into the terminal and hit up enter, right? Because that is what is telling Node, hey, go look at this file and go start from the top, run it all the way down and go execute those commands as we're going. So in week 7, we'll be diving into JavaScript in the browser, and we're going to be building projects all in the browser in JavaScript. But there are two primary ways to run your JavaScript. One is in the browser, and then the other is with Node.js, and that's typically used for server development. So those were the 3 packages that we installed. Did that answer your question?
Yeah, I had installed them before, but then I had done a factory reset. So
okay.
I installed them again, but I was like, I remembered that. I think I was hoping it would help other people more, but I remember that being very confusing when we first started.
Yeah. Any other questions?
Oh, I had one.
Sure.
So if we go in the Canvas and we have assignments.
Yep.
And the intro, the week 4 blog, I don't have a good picture that I can post.
Okay.
So I am not gonna do that part, I guess. If you just want the blog, I can just write a blog, I guess. I can just do that.
Yeah, if you can, just submit that in, because Caitlin is working on getting that blog post out. And if we don't have a response for you guys, you'll be left out of the blog. So it's okay to not upload a photo. Just put a note down at the bottom in bold that's like, I don't have a good headshot, or I'm waiting for Thursday to get a headshot or something like that. And we'll just skip your picture. But it's very important to get that out there, just so that you've got some media under the Hack Upstate name.
Okay. I was gonna ask you, you know how you have an emoji picture?
Yeah, it's a vector drawing, but yeah.
Where did you get it? Vector drawing?
I paid like 15 or 20 bucks for an artist to do that on Fiverr. I can try and find that link during the break and post it, where you
Okay.
basically upload a picture of yourself and then they convert it into a vector image.
I want that. I'm gonna put that one on. If something like that.
Yeah, Ariel absolutely loves that profile picture, right? Yeah, I use a vector. I joke that I should edit it every year and just move my hairline back a little bit. But other than that, it's I love using that vector one. It's professional enough. But we are attending Open Hack on Thursday, and they're doing another round of headshots with a professional photographer there. So if
Okay.
you are interested in getting a headshot Thursday, 6 o'clock, you can get a headshot there.
Hey,
Okay.
Matt.
I'll try to come to it.
Someone asked me a question. Say my name.
So Thursday, like, am I considered off?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, Open Hack is strongly encouraged, but not required. So if you're not in the area or you can't get there for transportation reasons, if you do need a pickup, just shoot me a message and I can probably pick you up on my way in. Other than that, it is, like I said, encouraged, but not required to attend on Thursday.
Well, Max, would you like to come get me?
There are some exceptions. You have to be in the greater Syracuse area, unfortunately. Okay, so let's kick it off with stand up if we don't have any other questions. Going a little out of order here, but that's okay. Actually, you know what? We're gonna skip stand up today because I've got an even more formal review for you. So, couple things I wanted to go over. Give me 1 second to pull up the outline for today, and I will share my screen. So this is all linked in the daily outline. The daily outline is going to be your go-to resource. So if you are not already familiar with this, if you head over to Canvas and in the home section, or if you go, I think you have modules over here on the left, there is the C5 daily outlines. If you pop that open and then on the left side here, jump down to Intro to Computer Science Part 2, we've got a ton of links in here. So you can see what we went over yesterday. In here, we have a couple things that we've got to get through. So I'm going to go through a slide review in a couple minutes just to go over those concepts. I also want to go over the resource review, which I am now mad that I thought I had linked into Canvas. Actually, I do. I have it linked under here in the JavaScript pre-reading. So I'm going to go over a couple of resources. We're going to go through the slides today, and these slides are covering all of these concepts that we're going to kind of play around with. Today is still a playground environment, right? Meaning that we're not really building anything super serious. We're just playing around, making sure that we're understanding those computer science concepts. So if you see CS, the acronym CS anywhere, that stands for computer science, and that's pretty widely agreed upon in the industry. So if you ever hear someone saying like CS50, for example, is a famous Harvard course, but computer science is kind of the science of what we're doing, right? How variables work, how loops work. All of that is a science because it's like an equation, right? When you think back to like chemistry, back if you took that in high school, right? Where you had to balance out the equation in order to make the chemical reaction happen. Same goes for our code, right? We are kind of learning the syntax, learning how to approach this problem in order for the computer to be able to understand it and execute it. So we are going to do a quick review because all of this stuff that we're learning can be a lot, right? And it's going to take a couple days, actually a couple weeks for all of this to sink in, and that's okay. So we're going to go over what we learned yesterday. We are going to go over some resources to get you ready for week 7 when JavaScript does roll around. And then we're going to go into kind of part 2 of computer science concepts. Any questions on any of that? Okay, so let's go into a quick review here. These should be mostly things that we covered yesterday. So, intro to JavaScript, right? HTML technically isn't a programming language. Technically, it is what we call a markup language, because it's basically a way to format our content in a way that the computer can understand it to lay it all out. And CSS is a style sheet language. JavaScript, however, was built back in the, I want to say, early 80s, and it was initially designed to run in the web browser. And what the problem that we ran into was HTML was great for getting content on the page, and CSS was great for styling that and getting it looking the way that we want. But the problem that they ran into was Web 2.0. Does anyone know what Web 1.0 is? So Web 1.0 was basically one-way information. You would go on the New York Times website and they would send you the web page, and that was it. The only interaction that you were doing with Web 1.0 was clicking on different pages and kind of navigating around the site. Web 2.0 was when we started layering in user interactivity, and we started adding in databases. We allowed users to start being able to post comments or upload photos or basically interact with the web page beyond just one-way information. That was kind of the genesis of social media, right? This ability for us not only to get information that developers had published on the internet, but for us to be able to interact with those web pages. Well, we needed some way to program that interactivity. And HTML wasn't great for it because that was for structuring content, and CSS wasn't great for that because it was for styling it. And so JavaScript was born. And so JavaScript is all about that interactivity, right? When the user clicks on this thing, when this event happens, how do we handle it? It just so happens that we're using the same language to learn our computer science concepts, to build our projects in the front end. Eventually, we'll be learning React, which kind of uses JavaScript. And finally, we'll be using JavaScript to do our server-side development as well. So we use JavaScript for a lot of heavy lifting, but it's important to recognize kind of what it was built for, what its roots are, and what it's most widely used for. And that is handling user interactivity in the web browser. You guys have heard me say this before, JavaScript are not the same language. Make sure to not make that mistake in front of any developer because they will laugh you out of the room. Big differences between them. Java does not natively run in the browser, but JavaScript does. You also may see some documentation, especially very technical documentation, that calls it ECMA script or ECMAScript. That is technically the name of JavaScript. JavaScript is kind of like the accepted language that everyone calls it, but under the hood, the technical name for it is ECMAScript. And you may even see that abbreviated down to ES and the version number. So ES6 or ES 2015. They both are referring to the same thing. One's just the version, one's the year that version came out. Oh, and it was built in 95. There we go. I knew I had a date around it. And that is, to this day, the dominant programming language that works across all three browsers. Okay. This is a review that we already went over, thanks to Eva asking. NPM is what we will be getting into later, but Node and Brew, two things that we already went over. We did the Brew install step, and then the steps that it took to get it our terminal to recognize that we installed Brew. From there, we went into the console, right? And we saw that, hey, our programs can't really do anything for us until we can see the output. And so by doing console.log, we are able to see the output of the computer as it's running the code. Okay. These are the steps that we went through to create our file, console log it out, go into the terminal, run the code, and see the output. Then we got into data types. We covered numbers, which we started adding together. We saw Booleans, which are true, false values. We saw strings and how we have to put them in quotes so the computer understands we're not executing that code. We touched on null and undefined a little bit, which is basically the computer having a spot or a variable in memory with no value assigned to it yet. We looked at objects for the first time, which are using our curly braces here. And then we also dug into arrays, right? And we saw that arrays can have different data types in them, and they always use those square brackets. We also learned that arrays are 0 indexed, and then that objects always use key values. The key always is going to be a string. The value in that object, though, for that key can be any data type. It doesn't necessarily have to be a string. And we can even nest objects inside of objects, which we saw for the first time when we were working with that cars object. Any questions so far? No, this is boring, but a lot of information came your way yesterday, so I think it's good to review all of this. Goggin, what's up?
So about the object. So the value, if it's a number, it does not have to be in the quotes, right?
Correct. Only
Just-
strings go in quotes. Yes.
Only strings go in quotes, and the Booleans also just true and false.
Correct. And null and undefined, you don't put in quotes, but strings you do.
So if it's undefined, right? Let's say, for example, we're waiting for a user input. So what is it going to be? Just quotes, empty quotes, or is it going to be empty space?
No, you would literally type in the word undefined. However, it's very rare to use the undefined variable.
All right. Thank you.
The significance of null and I think you meant undefined data types there are basically just a placeholder for the computer, right? So we may make a variable, we may name a variable, we may say, let my num, and then just put a semicolon there. Well, computer now knows that my num exists, but there's no value in it, right? And so that would be either null or undefined in JavaScript. They don't mean exactly the same thing, but as we're learning, it's okay to kind of mix those two or use them synonymously. It's basically saying, hey, we made the variable, but we didn't put anything in it. So what's in that variable kind of as a placeholder is either null or undefined until we save a variable into it. It's kind of like a TBD, yeah. So the easiest way we can see that, you don't have to follow along with me, I'm just using yesterday's code. If we say like, let my num 2, and then we console log out my num 2, and run this in our terminal, we can see my num 2 is undefined. Well, it's not saying that my num 2 doesn't exist. It's saying that my num 2 doesn't have a value defined to it. So what we can do is say my num 2 equals some number. And now when we console log it out, we are able to see that my num started out as undefined when we logged it the first time. Then we assigned a value to it. We basically defined a value for my num 2. And now we are able to see that. So it's kind of a TBD placeholder. Okay, let me switch back to slides. Any other questions?
Sorry, I have a question.
Yeah.
So for the array, that can just take any type of other, like it can take any type like number, strings.
Yes, and
booleans.
in fact, you can put an array in an array if you wanted to. You can think of an array just as a list. So just like you can store any kind of value in an object, any kind of data type in an object, you can do the same for an array, which is just a list of values.
Okay.
Okay. So we also talked a little bit about executing expressions, right? So when we see console.log 5 plus 10, we know that 15 is going to come out of it. But even though we look at this as one line of code, the computer actually breaks this up into 2 steps, right? It sees the 5 plus 10, ignores the console log, and behind the scenes, we can't see it doing this, but it's going to add those 2 numbers together, get the 15, and then take that 15 and realize that it needs to output it. We also saw variables. We saw const and let yesterday. Const meaning constant, that we can't change it. And we also saw let, right, which is that mutable value. That just means that we can change it. What we didn't talk about yesterday is var. var, for the first 25 years of JavaScript's life, maybe 20 years of JavaScript's life, var was the only way to declare or make a new variable in JavaScript. And var worked very similar to let. It always let you change the value. However, as JavaScript matured and new versions came out, there was a need to say, hey, there are some constant variables that we shouldn't be able to change. And if we can change it, it should break our code. And so the problem with that was that they wanted to differentiate when const came out. What was the opposite of const? What was going to let you change the value? And that's where they came up with let. So in all new JavaScript code, any code that you're writing from scratch, you should be using const or let to declare any of your variables. Well, if that's the case, why am I even teaching you about var? Because there are 20 plus years of JavaScript code that exists that is still using that var variable. That is called a legacy code. And that legacy code is basically not preferred for you to use it anymore. However, you may be going through some either learning resources that are still telling you to use var, or you may be hired at a company and some code may have been written 15 years ago that you're working on from scratch. var isn't going to break any of your code. It is still backwards compatible with all new JavaScript. However, if you're writing new code from scratch, you should be using const and let. Any questions?
Yeah, why did they change that? I mean, like, what's the difference between what var could do and what let can do?
Yeah, let, it gets a little technical. Let has better scoping on it, which basically means that when you're writing code that can be spanning multiple files, let is better at knowing the context of where it was declared and where you can reference it, as opposed to var, which is more global, which means you can reference it in more places, which means you may accidentally override a variable that you didn't even know you were accessing. So let is a little bit better at knowing the context of where you made it and where you tried to edit it or use it. Oversimplification there, but the summary there is const and let better to use than var, especially if you're in a more complicated code base. Okay. So we saw us using variables. We declared 2 variables. I don't think we did this exact console log, but we are able to use variables just like we use those numbers, right? So when the computer goes through and executes it, it's going to take whatever the values are of num1 and num2. They're going to dump that in the console log. The computer evaluates that out to 3, and then that's what we see in our console. We also saw what happens when we mix data types. So even though we called num2 a num, because it has those quotes, it's going to see that that 2 isn't actually a number. It is now a string according to JavaScript. so that when we add those two together, because it is a string, it's not actually adding them together, it's concatenating them. So the output that we get whenever we use the plus operator with a string is going to be taking the two values and pushing them together, which we call concatenation. And we also can see concatenation when we use them together with two different strings, or in this situation, it's actually 3 different strings, because we use the variable name, we use an inline string with a space between the quotes, and then we use our second variable there to add that together. We also saw comments, 2 different kinds of comments we can use. We can use a double slash, which will restrict us to just putting the text on that one line, or we can use a /*, which can span multiple lines, but we do have to remember to use the // to close it off. Jen, what's up?
On that slide before, those double quotes with just a space in between them, is that literally just putting the space in between the 2 words?
Yes.
Okay, because yesterday you put it in there and I didn't know if it was supposed to be in there or not, so I deleted it and nothing changed, but I was just wondering.
Yeah, so there are 2 ways to kind of achieve this. We could put a space after the X and before the closing quote. We could put a space between the opening quote and the M, or we could concatenate it with our first name and last name without any spaces and then put a space in between it. All 3 of those would achieve the exact same thing. It just depends how much like control you have over the variables.
Okay, thank you.
Goggin, what's up? You're on mute.
Yeah, so I had a question. I was thinking about this. I was like, I have something to ask. So the var, the value, the variable.
Mhm.
So I have seen a lot of time that if you dug into like let's say for example Bootstrap, right? If you use something like an older version or something else, and they have a var has a variable, and you are using let from now on, and how we gonna match it up to that? Like, if you want to use that instead.
So we will never be overriding Bootstrap JavaScript. All the JavaScript that we'll be writing will either be in React or will be our own JavaScript from scratch. So we won't really ever be editing Bootstrap JavaScript, and that's not something that I can say I've ever had to do professionally in my career, because those Bootstrap JavaScript interactivity is it just works out of the box. And then anytime that I wanted to add my own interactivity on top of that, I would do that in my own JavaScript file, not editing the Bootstrap file itself. With that said, all newer browsers and all newer versions of Node support const and let. And so you can use the existing code base and have all the vars left in it. And then when you declare a new variable, use const and let, and Node and the browser won't have any issues intermixing the 2 of them.
Yeah, that was my question. All right, perfect.
Yeah. Eva, what's up?
Here's something I never understood, and I just noticed it when you were talking. You kept referring to the const as a variable.
Yep.
But isn't let the variable now? I was never clear on that. Like, what's the difference between a constant and a variable? Like, I'm trying to think back to high school algebra, which was a ways back. And the constant could never change, and the variables were like the X and the Y.
So both const and let are variables. Const just means it can't change. Let means it can. So whenever we use const or let, we're declaring a new variable, and whatever the name is that comes after the const or let is the name of the variable. Then the equal is the assignment operator, and whatever comes on the right of the equal is going to be stored on the left variable name. So if we look at our code, we are saying const mynum. So this is const is saying what kind of variable is it? It is a constant variable. Mynum is the name of the variable. The equal is what we call the assignment operator, which is saying take whatever is on the right side of this and store it into whatever is on the left side of this, which is called minus. And we can do that not only with numbers, but we can take other data types like strings and store them in, or we can even use more advanced data types like objects. And in this case, this entire object is getting stored into the variable called numpats. So const and let aren't the actual variables themselves. They are the keywords used to make a new variable. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, kind of. I think I'm overthinking it, as I am wont to do, but I just always get confused. I mean, I understand how to use them, but that I never was quite clear. Like if you said instead of let my array, right, up
Mhm.
above on line 38, if you said const my array, how would that change things?
It would just mean that arrays and objects are kind of an exception, but the beginner thinking, if you made this a const, you
Yeah.
shouldn't be able to edit or add or remove any numbers from it.
Okay,
A
That
const
helps
is
a lot.
freezing it. It's saying this is constant. Here's my list of numbers, no changes, no touching. A let would say, hey, if you want to be able to add things to the end of this array or edit one of the numbers in the array, you can do that.
gotcha. So you would use that anytime you're taking in data and trying
Yes.
to manipulate it. Thank you. That was a really good explanation. Thanks.
No problem. Yeah, both are variables. It's just one's a changeable variable and the other one is declaring it as a constant. Okay, that is all I have for review. So with all of that said, is there anything from yesterday that is lingering? Jen, yes, both are variables. Both are using const or let to declare a new variable. It's kind of like saying, before we can say x equals 5, we have to tell the computer, hey, x is the name of a new variable. But the types of the variables, yes, are either mutable or not mutable. And mutable just means that you can change it or you can't change it. So const is immutable, and let is mutable, meaning that you can edit that value down the road. And I would consider that a variable type, yes. Okay, any questions from yesterday before we move on to resources and then diving into some new code? Okay, buckle up because I've got a lot of resources for you. And this is always tricky to time this because what we're learning is computer science principles, but how we're learning it is using the language of JavaScript, right? It would kind of be like trying to teach you grammar without you knowing English first. Well, you can't learn grammar without knowing some of the vocab and the vernacular and all of that kind of stuff. Same goes with computer science, right? We need some way to be able to test this and learn these concepts. So what I have put together for you is this JavaScript pre-reading, which is in Canvas as week 7 pre-reading, but a lot of these resources will help you as we're learning these computer science concepts as well. So this isn't anything that you really need to submit, but I'm going to do a quick run through of these resources just so you have exposure to them. Palash already stole one of mine and posted it in the chat. And that's actually one of my favorites. I will say that this is in order that I personally recommend them. That does not mean that they are the order that is going to be most helpful for you. However, this is just the order that if I were starting from scratch and I knew no programming, the order of these resources are what would be most helpful to me. That should not, however, make you look at a resource towards the bottom of this list and go, yeah, this is helpful to me, but if Max doesn't like it, everything on this list is max approved. And I will stand by what I said yesterday, which is when you find a resource that you like, latch onto it. Don't go to other resources, just see if that resource has more information that you're looking for. So the first one I'm going to point you guys at is the Odin project. You will find that this is a lot like Free Code Camp, except it's got a little bit more documentation in it. And the reason why I like that is because professionally, when you get out in the real world, you're going to have to read this technical documentation. And so if you just pop into any one of these, they will give you a whole overview of what you're supposed to be learning, definition of the terms and links out to W3 schools and MDN, and then a whole breakdown of the lesson. And then some common questions that you should be able to answer by the time you get to the end of the lesson. So it's a little different than Free Code Camp, really great resource for you. And if you are finding that you're struggling with concepts in class, this can be a great way to supplement that content. This is a great PDF cheat sheet. That if you are a PDF person, if you are someone who likes to have things printed out and have hard copies of things, if you tend to like it when I draw on the screen to connect concepts, this is for you. So this gives you a whole breakdown of what we were just talking about, var let const, valid keywords to declare variables. And then it says, oh, we do a deeper dive on this on page 7. So you can rifle through your pages and jump down to page 7, and it will give you a whole breakdown of the different variables and what the impact is of them. We haven't covered the event loop yet. In fact, we probably haven't covered 90% of what's on this cheat sheet yet. So don't overwhelm yourself. But as you are learning concepts, it may be helpful to have this printed out on your desk. And when you want to go back and go, I know I need an object here, I can't remember what the syntax is, you can take a look at this and see the keys and the values and all the information that we're learning throughout class. So I really like this one. This is a visual one. Another one that I really like is the Code Academy JavaScript reference sheet. So this is more of a website than a PDF. However, you do have an option to click the print button out here and print this out. So this is more of a, it's a little less overwhelming. It's a little less visual, but I really like it because it's straightforward and whatever they're showing you has a little code snippet over on the right. Definitely go through all of these different topics over here because there's a lot more information. For example, we're going to be getting into loops tonight for the first time, and we're also going to be getting into arrays and some different methods on it. One of the most common questions that I get at the end of class tonight is how do I remember the names of all the different methods? One is by using a cheat sheet just like this. And the other is to be able to reference W3 schools. So W3 schools, just like HTML and CSS, has a whole deep dive on JavaScript, and they will have all kinds of things over here. So if you are wondering what the difference is between let and const, right over here on this sidebar, you can see everything that they're going to go through, all that documentation here. And even the array methods that we're going to be learning tonight, like pop and push, are all documented in here. I'm showing you all of these not to overwhelm you, but to show you that everyone learns a little differently. And once you find that resource that you like, latch on to it. This is a 29-page PDF. So if you are someone who learns better from reading a book, if you're someone who likes a textbook or likes a little bit more verbosity when they are learning, verbosity, I don't know, I maybe just made that word up, who knows? If you like reading, check this out. This goes a little bit more in depth, but gives you a really good breakdown. Like the operators that we were learning last night, we just skimmed the surface with plus and minus, but there are all kinds of different operators in here. So if you are someone who likes to kind of unlock a skill by learning all the little details of it, this PDF is great for you. Wes Bowes is a great instructor. In fact, I take a lot of my teaching inspiration from him. He does a lot of hands-on learning, and he's got all kinds of courses in here. Some are free, some are paid. A very popular one is JavaScript 30. And some people like doing this while they're going through class. Some people like saving this for after they graduate. So that they can have some project ideas to keep the momentum after they graduate. So this is 30 different projects that you can create in JavaScript, and he takes you through on video and gives you the example code. So I don't want you to overwhelm yourselves here, but if you are looking to push your JavaScript knowledge and still have some inspiration of projects to build, JavaScript 30 is a great one and is completely free. If you are going through this and you're like, I want more JavaScript, I want more course material, I've got time on my hands, this beginner JavaScript is a great option. You do have to pay for it, and it does go on sale at Black Friday. Not that that helps you guys at all, because that's like 9 months away, less than that. But Wes Bowes has some great courses in here. Check them out. And I believe that he actually has a coupon code for students. If you just Google Wes Bowes student discount, it should come up, and I would recommend checking out his courses as well. Oh, good. I even linked to the sub sheets there. Free Code Camp has awesome YouTube videos. Be careful on YouTube, because you can go down a rabbit hole of YouTube resources that will take you off track. So if you are someone who learns particularly well from YouTube, but you aren't quite clicking either in class or rewatching our class videos, Free Code Camp has a great deep dive. That is a 3-hour-long video, but there are some students who have gotten light bulb moments by watching that. The last two things that I will mention, JavaScript info. This is really good if you know specifically what concept you're struggling with, but want it kind of in a bite-sized format. For example, we are going to dive in, or yesterday we worked with variables. So if you pop this open, there's a whole breakdown of everything you need to know about variables, what it takes to name a variable, knowing that the first character can't be a digit. So this is really good if you like small kind of chapters, still in a website format. JavaScript info, great place to check out. The last one I will mention, and then we will get into some new code tonight, is Eloquent JavaScript. Ariel, what are your thoughts on Eloquent JavaScript?
Personally, it was not my thing.
I can use the bottom two.
I don't know if you're trying to, so I apologize. I'm not sure if you're trying to troll me, but I know that going through 2 listening chapters of that was not for me. I personally did much better on the Free Code Camp.
So Eloquent JavaScript is very polarizing. Some people love this and they're like, why didn't you just start with this in the first place? I now understand JavaScript. I am in the totally opposite camp, that when I go through this, I am confused out of my mind, and I have no idea why people like this book. It is a very different way of learning. However, like I said, there are some students where they don't understand anything of JavaScript, and they go through all the different resources and they're like, all right, I see the code, I still don't understand it all. And then they read this and all of a sudden they are computer science masters and can write JavaScript like nobody's business. So I will throw this out here because this is actually what we started our cohort 1 curriculum based off of. And it does cover the core concepts of what you need to know about computer science and JavaScript as a whole very well. It's very well laid out. But Eloquent JavaScript, it kind of makes you think like the computer thinks, not as the way you think as a developer who's trying to build something. So again, if you are someone who likes to know how everything works under the hood before you start using it, Eloquent JavaScript can be a great book for you. This is totally available for free on their website, or you can click on the link over here for the paperback copy, and you can order it for $40 and they will ship it to you, or you can go on Amazon, and I think they sell it on Amazon as well. So completely free on their website to go through these chapters. I wouldn't recommend necessarily starting here in your JavaScript resources, but if you think a little differently, if you're finding none of the other resources work for you, who knows, this could be your ticket to understanding JavaScript inside and out. Any questions on any of that? Last thing I will say, I promise I am not going to go through all of these, but these are some books that have been recommended by other students. I personally have not read any of these. The You Don't Know JavaScript is a very popular series that I know students have liked. Karen personally recommends A Smarter Way to Learn JavaScript. A couple different book options for you there. But JavaScript is really that first time in the program that you got to step it up, right? That you're going to realize that no matter how many hours you spend in class, JavaScript is not going to just click or come naturally to you. And so the reason why we overload you with resources here is not to overwhelm you. It's just so you know, hey, there is a go-to list of resources that we personally recommend or other students have recommended. Go through them. Don't need to do this in advance. If you're someone who likes to get a leg up before they go into class, this can be a great way to spend some time in the next 2 weeks. If you're someone who wants to learn it in class first and then go to the resources to kind of really understand it and let it all sink in, that is another great option for you. And I can't believe, I think I have it in as an optional homework assignment. I also link to sections I recommend this week 7 through 10 in Free Code Camp. These are the sections I recommend in Free Code Camp if you are more of a bite-sized learner, if you want little challenges and you want to write the code as you're learning it. If you like basically Free Code Camp so far for HTML and CSS, then you will probably like Free Code Camp for JavaScript. That is the easiest way to kind of get practice without taking on this massive, massive project that you have to complete. Okay, you're probably sick of me harping on all these different resources. Any questions?
So I was gonna ask you. So I have heard that just wanted to clear things up here.
Yeah.
So everyone writes the code in different ways, like JavaScript. But I think if you just read the code, it means the same thing. Let's say you write the code, like we want the same thing. We want to make the same thing.
Yep.
But end of the day, it would mean the same thing if we go through the code. Because the arrow, you can write arrow function in 2 ways now, since because JavaScript is keep updating or 3 ways. I don't know. There's like a couple of ways you
can only write an arrow function one way. You can write functions multiple ways. But
yeah,
you can only write an arrow function one way.
Functions, like with the equal and arrow function, whatever, like the new. But that's the only difference that I noted. Every time I go take a course or something on Udemy or whatever, the only thing they do differently is they use different signs or like a shortcut to do the same thing, like write a function. But yeah, I don't know. I could be wrong. I'm just
no, and that's fair, and you'll find that in the workplace as well. So there are the example that comes best to my mind is when we start diving into JavaScript and HTML. We can either put something called an on-click in our HTML that tells it what JavaScript to go run, Or we can tell our JavaScript to go find it in the HTML and attach an on-click to it in the JavaScript. Well, you will find that all developers are particularly opinionated. If you would like to start an argument on Thursday at OpenHack, just ask developers if they prefer tabs or spaces, and they will rip each other's heads off and start fighting over whether spaces are better in code or tabs are better in code. They're all wrong. Tabs are better in code, but I know better than to start that argument.
I will now.
So, I don't want to say that my teaching style is better. My teaching style may resonate with you guys more than another teaching style, and that's okay. And there are other teaching styles or coding methods that may make more sense to you than my style. That's all right. There's actually something called a coding signature, which is something that you just develop over time. When I read through, I have a team of 3 other developers where I work, and I review all of their code in addition to writing my own code. And without even looking at who the author is of that code, I can tell you usually immediately who wrote that code just by the style of what they named the variables, how they wrote the loop over something, how the data is structured, how well named the variables are. Just like if you wrote a book and someone else wrote a book on the same exact topic, your books would not be the same, right? They would be told totally different. That's okay, right? Everyone is going to be a little different, and everyone's going to have a different approach. At the end of the day, what really matters is, does the computer execute the code? Does the computer do what you want it to do? And if it does, great. We're going to build our way up just like the HTML, right? We started with this little weather app and we got all of that laid out, and then look at Netflix and our portfolio site, right? I don't think you guys would think in 3 weeks at the beginning of week 2, you would be able to build a site like Portfolio, but look, we got there, right? The same goes for our JavaScript. We're going to start with a little basic web page starting at week 7, where you type in 2 numbers and click an add button and the number shows up. That's what we're going to start with. What we are going to end with is a entire app. Let me see where you can pick a movie in the dropdown, see all the chairs that are taken, and based off of this, click on the chairs to change the different colors to have it selected. And down at the bottom, you'll see it's totaling up my movie price because this movie happens to be $9. And then when we hit the checkout button, it will mark those seats as taken. So this is what we're going to work our way up to. Ariel, any comments, thoughts, concerns, additions?
Just mostly what I already said in the chat, between there's apps and stuff you can utilize, but ultimately you need to figure out your learning style and go from there. Max is not everybody's cup of tea. Was not mine for a long time. I just happen to resonate with the teaching.
You say as I'm drinking my cup of tea.
You will notice what he was saying about code signature seriously applies, because you'll notice closer to your capstone when you're freaking out and you don't know what you did wrong. You will find yourself in tutorial hell or other GitHubs and copy and paste things and grab it. And Max will call you out immediately and say, where the hell did you get this? And you can sit and tell him he taught it to you and he knows better. So you really need to make sure when you get to the point that you're copying and pasting, especially with JavaScript and React, you understand what you're doing. Because if he pulls it out and he goes, okay, you need to explain it, you need to explain it because you need to in a real job. If you have problems understanding it, always try another resource, but don't get overwhelmed to the point you're overdoing it. And stay away from that book if you can help it, because I don't think I could do that, but somebody might use it. I don't know. Very, very few of you.
It was amazing. The first time we taught this, we had 4 weeks of JavaScript, 4 different instructors, and 2 of the instructors were like, this is amazing, like this made it so much easier to teach everything in JavaScript. And then the other 2 instructors, me included, was like, this is terrible, we confused our students so much, why did we ever use this book? So that is very polarizing, and there's a reason why it's at the bottom of my list. But for some of you, you may lose all hope in JavaScript and get to that book, and that book is a savior for you. So I can't discount it off the list entirely, but I can certainly put it down at the bottom. All right, I feel like that is a little overwhelming. Hopefully it is helpful just to see the different kinds of resources out there and hear a little bit of an explanation on them. I tried to document that on the sheet, but I think it's worth going through that in class time, only because there are so many different resources out there for you guys. Hopefully this is just a taste of the exposure, and hopefully you'll be spending a little bit of time going through those resources, finding one that works for you. You don't have to do it tonight. You don't have to do it this weekend. But as we're going in JavaScript, just know that you are not the first people trying to learn how to code. And there is so much available to you guys. So, got a support network out there for you. All of that said, are we ready to dive into part 2 of Intro to Computer Science? Okay, just go through those resources. You got a couple weeks. Have a great night, everyone. No, I'm just kidding. Let's dive in. Okay, so I'm going to start with making a separate playground file. We could keep working in the file that we had yesterday. I just like to create my own, keep my files organized and keep everything in place. So I'm going to go to my code, my week 5. I am going to go to a new folder and go to day 2. I am going to take my day 2 folder and drag it into VS Code and close out my day 1. And you guys probably don't have that pop up, so you don't have to worry about it. And you will find that all of that installation hell that we had to go over yesterday is in our past. We've got everything installed. We don't need to do anything in the terminal other than tell it to run our code. So I'm going to come over here and I'm going to create a new file, and I'm going to call it playground.js tonight instead of script.js, just so we understand what we're telling Node to do. Once I do that, whenever I create a new file, I always like to test that file to make sure that I created it right and make sure that it's all running. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come in here and I'm just going to console log out hello world. That is giving us practice with our JavaScript syntax, with our parentheses, with our quotes, which means a string is coming. And it's also going to give us practice right-clicking on the file and going down to Open in Integrated Terminal, coming down here and typing in Node. And now instead of script.js, we're going to type in playground.js because we renamed the file, right? We're using a different JavaScript file tonight. So if I hit enter on that in my terminal, I should see hello world. And if you do, you are all caught up. And I'm going to start a live share for you guys so you can follow along as well. Don't forget to do a file new window before joining that live share, just to make sure your code is up with my code.
How do we get to the terminal again?
Yeah, right click on the file that you created, playground.js, and go down to Open in Integrated Terminal.
Thank you.
And yes, make sure you save the file before you run the node playground.js command in the terminal. I'm also going to drop a link to the slides that I am referencing tonight. They are also in the daily outline for today, but if you would like a couple more windows to open in juggle, you can do that. It depends how you have your autosave set up, Ali. So if you are in, if you go, you don't have to follow me here. I'm just showing you. If you go into your settings and do a search for autosave, if you have this set to on focus change, when you click down in the terminal, it will automatically save your file. If you have it set to on window change, because we're not going out to the browser window, it won't automatically save the file until we start writing JavaScript for the browser, and then it will. So if you want your autosave to work when you click down into the terminal, you can change this to on focus change, and that will make it automatically save when you click down into the terminal and hit up enter to rerun it. Again, to get to that command and the comma key, do a search for autosave, and then your drop down here can get set to on focus change. If it's not
You
on.
really save all the best tricks for yourself till later.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
What's that?
I said you really saved all the best tricks for yourself till later. That's crazy.
What about is sorry, so is after delay, is that like if you don't touch the keyboard for a couple seconds?
Yeah. If you pick after delay, there's a autosave delay down here in milliseconds. So it's basically saying if you don't touch anything for a second, it will automatically save the file. I have mine set to on focus change. And that's what I use not only in VS Code, but in my text editor that I use for my professional code.
Hey, Max,
Yes.
I have an invalid collaboration session URL for your live.
Try copying it again from Zoom. Make sure you right click on it and hit copy instead of highlighting the text.
Yep.
Still having that error?
Yep.
Sometimes the issue is you pasted it in for your name instead.
No, I did that. I put my name in there and then went to the,
Share screen.
done
let's
it
take a
like 5 things at 5 times. It's being weird.
You are pasting in the Google Docs URL, not you're pasting in the slides URL, not the live share URL.
Wait, this one right here, right?
No. Look at the look at the link that you pasted in. It's docs.google.com. Those are my slides. The live share link is up in the chat at 6:36.
Oh, Jesus. Thank you.
I'm a good coder, but I don't know that I'm on Jesus's level. All right, we ready to dive in tonight? Okay, so one thing that we didn't touch on yesterday that we probably should is let's make 2 variables. So I'm going to make a const because this variable is not going to change. I'm going to say first name, and I'm going to put my name in as a string. And I'm also going to do a const with my last name. And notice I'm camel casing here, right? First words, all lowercase, any subsequent words are a capital letter, and then the rest of them in lowercase. That is JavaScript's preferred variable naming convention, because in JavaScript, variables cannot have a space in their name, and they cannot start with a number. They can have numbers in them, but they cannot start with a number. So I'm going to say my last name is Matthews, and we can get access to some properties on those strings. So if I console log out my first name here, go down to my terminal and hit the up arrow key and enter, I can see Max coming out. I don't need my hello world here. That might get in the way. So I'm going to hit command / on that, and that will just comment it out automatically for me. So I'm going to save that. And I've got Max here. I console logged it. That makes sense. Well, we also have some access to properties on this. And the most common property to use on a string is a property called length. So we use dot notation just like we do on an object, And now when I run that command, I don't get max coming out, I get 3. So it's important to note that length is not 0 indexed. It is literally giving us the number of letters inside of that string. Well, if we can do that, we can also kind of get fancy. We can use an operator and say something like console.log name length is, and then console log actually will let you take what we call multiple parameters, which we're going to go on get into a little bit later on in class tonight. But what I can do is say first name dot length plus my last name dot length. Okay, how's that going to work? It's going to go to first name. It's going to say we need the length of that, and it's going to get 3. Then it's going to take the last name. It's going to count the number of letters in my last name, add those two together, and then output my string with the 2 numbers added together. So if it works and I come down and I run it, I get name length is 11. And obviously, if you used your first and last name, your name length will probably vary. Any questions? I am referencing the slides as I'm going, by the way. I'm just not pulling them over to my screen share just because there's a lot going on already. So if you are someone who is a visual learner and you don't want to follow along tonight, but you still want to see the code, just pull up the slides. That's totally fine. I'm not going to ask you to turn this in. I don't have a nasty pop quiz waiting for you at the end of class. So if you are someone who likes to kind of just see it visually, you don't have to code along with me if you don't want to. Okay, so yesterday we started playing around with objects. So I'm going to create a new variable. It's going to be a const, but this time I'm going to make it an object with my first name as the key and the value of it as a string. And I'm also going to add in my last name as another key inside the name object. And we know it's an object because of these curly braces. And I'm going to go ahead and put my name into that. Now we know that we can see the value of that variable by just console logging the name out, but we may want to access the individual values inside this object. So to do that, we can say dot first name, put a space in between it, and also put our name dot last name, save, run, and I get my name outputted.
Wait, can you say that again, please?
So I'm going to actually rename this to person just so it's a little bit easier to understand the code. So when we make an object always has keys that are strings and then values that can be any data type. And so sometimes we want to access individual pieces of information in our object, right? And we may not want to access all the pieces of the information in it. So if I say age, I could add that in there, right? But I may not want to access the part of the age. I may want to access the individual pieces of information inside my object. So in order to do that, I use the variable name of the object. Then I use a period, and whenever we use that period, it's like peeling away a layer of the onion to get deeper down into that object. So I'm using dot first name, and what comes out of first name is my string called max. I also use that same technique to get my last name out, And that's why we see Max Matthews as part of the output, because we're using the keys to access the values.
Got it.
This, however, is not the only way to access a value in an object. The other way we can do it, I'm just going to comment that out for now, is by using what we call bracket notation. So we use the same square brackets that we use for an array, but inside of this, we can put the string of information in that we are trying to get out. And we can intermix these two. We can use dot notation on one and bracket notation on the other. You're going to see why we have bracket notation in a second and why it's superior. However, it is much preferred in JavaScript to use dot notation when we can. So if I save this and I come down here and run it, I should get Max Matthews out. Now notice what happens if I just accidentally put a lowercase n in there. What do I get? I get undefined Matthews. Okay, why? Because it's looking for the key first name in all lowercase. It can't find that in my object because it has an uppercase n. So what does it print out? It prints out undefined, but then it can find my last name, so it does print that part out. So just be careful on your keys. Make sure that your casing is matching. The reason why, question?
So instead of putting the dot, we can just use the square brackets. And
yes, keep in mind though that you have to put the quotes in as well for the string. Now, why do we have bracket notation in the first place if dot notation is the preferred notation that we use? Well, that's because in bracket notation, we can use what we call a dynamic key. In other words, we can actually say the key that we want to get out is first name. Now we can console log out our person key. Keep in mind here, I did not put the quotes in here. Those quotes up here are telling it to literally find the key called first name. Because I don't have the quotes in this version of it, it is going up to the variable called key, realizing that the key is first name and outputting that into our bracket notation to find the first name in the person object. So when I come down here and run it, I get Max. Look at what happens if I try to do that with bracket notation. If I say person.key, I get undefined. Well, why? Because there is no key in the person object with the name of key. There's first name, last name, and age. We also run into that problem if we use our bracket notation and put it in quotes. Those quotes are telling it literally, go find a key named key, and that doesn't exist. But by leaving the quotes out, we are telling it, don't look for a key called key, look for a key variable that has the value first name stored in it. So what ends up happening is we kind of trickle this code down. We take the first name and we store it in the key. That key then gets dumped into the bracket notation that then looks for first name in our person object, gets the name of Max, and pulls that down to be logged out down here. Ali, it really depends. So there are some times that you may need a dynamic key. You may be asking the user, what piece of information would you like to know? And if the user types in first name, that is when we would need a dynamic key. And so what we would have to use is the brackets notation there. However, I would say about 90% of the time, you won't see bracket notation. Instead, you'll see this dot notation up here, which is preferred to use over this bracket notation with the quotes in it. Unless, like I said, the key is some dynamic piece of information, and then you have to use that bracket notation. And you always have to use bracket notation with an array as well. Palash, what's up?
So are we going to use the quotation marks even if the value of key is a number or Boolean or whatever?
Yeah, so keys in objects always have to be strings. And so even though you may put a number in there, the computer is automatically converting that to a string for you.
Understood. That makes sense.
Any questions on the syntax?
Wait, so line 11 is just bracket and dot like together?
Line 10?
Yeah, I'm sorry. Mine's
Yes,
is, yeah.
It is
okay.
both. Yep. So this would be not preferred in JavaScript because you could write this as dot syntax. But in this case down here, we would have to use bracket syntax because we have what we call a dynamic key. And we could call this key anything. We could call this info about the person, as long as we're consistent with the variable name. So this would output the exact same piece of information. Okay. One more concept I want to go over, and that is parameters. So you may see in my console log here, I put a comma. And we've seen a comma in one other place before. We saw a comma when we are making our object and separating out our keys. Parameters, also sometimes called arguments, which are slightly different, but the same concept, are basically pieces of information that the function needs, like console.log, in order to work properly. Later on tonight, we're going to learn how to make our own functions that receive parameters. However, for right now, it's important to note that we are sending two different parameters or arguments into our console log. We know that because they are separated with a comma. Now, you may be looking at this and saying name length is the first parameter. That makes sense. But we've got two different pieces of information here. Well, according to the computer, this isn't 3 parameters altogether. It's technically only 2, because these 2 are going to get added together before that information is passed into the console.log, which is outputting the information for us. In order to see that visually, this is what the parameters look like. So in our console log, we're passing in first param and second param, 2 parameters there. Or we can also pass in parameters that are variables. So we can say num1 equals 5, pass in that num1, and then we can output that. So a parameter is a variable or a value, like a string or a number itself, passed into the function so the function knows how to operate. Just a little bit of vocab for you. By the way, I have been updating the vocab sheet. That is linked in the daily outlines tonight under terms list. So if you are a flashcard person, I do have that up to date with all of the terms that we are using this week and will continue to be using later on. Okay, we are close enough to break time. When we come back, we are going to learn about conditionals or if statements. So go on break, be back at 7:25. I will stick around just for a minute in case anyone has questions. All right, so we are going to dive into if statements, also called conditionals. So just a reminder that I do have these slides. They are linked in the chat and in the daily outline. So if statements are just a way to basically say, hey, if this thing is true between these parentheses, then we're going to run whatever code is between the curly braces. However, we can chain that by using an if and an else. So if this thing is true, it's going to do whatever the code is between the first set of curly braces. Else, if this thing is not true, do the code down here instead. So this is what an if statement looks like, and this is what we're going to type out. So we're going to do our if, and then we're going to check to see if this number is greater than 10. If the number is greater than 10, it's going to print this statement out here. Then we're going to chain it with an else if. The way an else if works is it checks to see if this is true first. If it is, it's going to print this code and ignore everything else down here. If it isn't true, it's going to go on and check this statement right here. This is the first time that we've seen an equality checker. This is checking to see if the number matches the number 9 exactly. If it does, it's going to print that out. And finally, if this is not true and this is not true, it is going to come down here and it's going to print this out instead. So let's see what that looks like in our code. So I'm going to say, I'm going to start out and I'm going to say, hey, num1, I already called something num1. No, I didn't. Okay. Num1 is equal to, let's start with 15. We're going to say if num1 is greater than 10, console.log. Whoa, big number. Now, keep in mind that all of these concepts are kind of building on each other. So this is the first time that we're seeing curly braces used for something other than an object. The only two times that we use a curly brace is either 1, when we are defining a new object, or 2, when we are using a block of code. When I say a block of code, we could actually put more lines of code down here, and they would still run because they're between the opening curly here and the closing curly down here. So I'm going to say else if num1 equals 9, console.log big-ish number, else console.log it's not a big number. So I save that, I come down to my terminal and I say node playground.js and I get, whoa, big number. Why? Because our number is 15. If I change that and make my number 9 and rerun it, I get big-ish number, because what's it doing? It's taking that num1 and comparing it to the number 9. Num1, which is 9, is equal to the number 9. So it ignores whatever is in this else. It does not do what's in this up here. What it's going to do is just log out big-ish number. And then obviously, if we do something like a negative number and run it, we're going to get it's not a big number. Any questions on that? Anyone need help getting their code to run if you're following along? Not saying that you have to.
Max,
Yes.
so so we have else if num1 9. Why is there nothing under the third else? I don't know if I missed that.
You mean here?
No, and because we don't have anything that says if whatever.
Oh, so we can chain as many of these as we want or not chain them at all. So we could decide we don't want this else if in here and just say if the number is 10, then do this, else do this. So basically what the else is doing is it's checking all of the ifs. And if this isn't true and this isn't true, and if we had any other else ifs, if all of those weren't true, then it would print this out.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
And yes, I'm changing the number up here on 15 to test those different conditions. So if I put a number up here and test it, I can see only this is logging out. So it's kind of interesting because we can actually have syntax errors in here and Node will just completely ignore them unless that if statement is true. And if that is true, then it would go through and read those lines between our curly braces.
Did I miss the reason why there's 3 equal signs?
Yeah, 3 equal sign is a comparison operator. So we use 1 equal sign when we want to assign the variable, right? We're saying 15 is now equal to the variable called num1. We use triple equal signs when we're trying to compare 2 different values, when we're trying to say, does this equal the same value as this? So this 1 equal sign is technically called an assignment operator compared to the triple equal sign, which is called a comparison operator. The other comparison operators that we have are less than, equal to, and greater than equal to, and stuff like that. So we can actually use what we call a logical statement. So we can say, let me try something like, so we could do something like a Boolean statement where we say, hey, sarcasm is set to false. Then we can chain that in our operators. So we can say, if num1 is greater than 10, and sarcasm is equal to true, then print out whoa, big number. Else, if num1 is greater than 10 and sarcasm equals false, then console.log something like, that's quite a big number.
You have 2 spellings of sarcasm before you try to run that.
Yeah, what the problem is, which one is right?
The second one.
Okay, thank you.
No, this
Neither
no
is
way.
SARCASM. Okay.
Right.
Remember when I said in the chat it was false? That was correct, though.
Yeah, your sarcasm unfortunately never gets set to false. Okay.
Milton just learned why it's better to use the double quotations instead of just one. You try to put an apostrophe in it and it ends it.
Yes. And so we're actually going to learn about backticks and a template literal, which avoids both types of quotes. But yes, if you are using single quotes here, this single quote will match up with the opening single quote and close it off. So that is one reason why double quotes are preferred. And there is a way to escape that quote so it doesn't actually read it as the closing, but we're getting a little bit ahead of ourselves there. So anyway, this is a way to chain our operators. We can also use the OR operator. So we can say double vertical bars. So that's saying if num1 is greater than 10 or sarcasm is equal to false. But we're going to work our way up to those logical statements. So now if I run this, we'll see that's quite a big number because sarcasm is set to false and it's greater than 10. But if I modify my sarcasm and set it to true, then I'm going to get, whoa, big number. So this is a way to maybe say, based off of the user's input, if the user is looking for sarcasm, go do this code over here. Otherwise, if they're not looking for sarcasm, go do this code over here. And the order of these if statements matter. So if this first one is true and ones down here are also true, it doesn't matter. It will only find the first true one, run this code, then ignore everything else down here. 2 and signs and 2 vertical bars for or, just because like the triple equal, it's a logical operator. So it's basically telling the computer that 2 ampersands means and 2 vertical bars means or. There is a single ampersand in JavaScript, but I have never used it. It's called the bitwise operator. Gets really technical into how bits work in binary under the hood. But we use 2 ampersands to basically say and 2 vertical bars to say or in a logical statement.
Super
So-
quick, if you
yeah.
put an else if underneath the else, is it still gonna run that before it runs the else?
No, else always has to be the last case.
Okay.
I think it's actually a really good question. I'm pretty sure JavaScript's going to yell at me. Yeah, it's going to see this else if, and it's like, what the heck? You said else. What do you mean the else if coming down here? So it does have to be in order. And we always start with an if. We can't start with an else if. I don't know if Prettier will pick it up if we flip the order of them, but Prettier does pick that up. And Node would yell at us as well if we tried to run that code. It's going to say unexpected token else, because it found the last else here and is confused that there's another else if after it. Okay. Any questions on if statements?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Instead of putting in like num1 greater than 10, num1 is a variable, can we also add key value pairs over there? Does it work?
You mean if we did something like const obj equals
right, like we did on top, like person dot first name equals max.
Yep, totally can do that. Let me just reuse that object. So we could definitely say, let me put an else if in here. We could say something like if person dot first name equals max, console.log something.
Yeah.
And now this is kind of interesting because number is greater than 10.
Right.
So it's going to come in here, but sarcasm is not equal to true. So it's going to come down here, check a completely different condition. And because this is true, we should have this console log out. So let's give it a try. That is exactly
Max
what
is
we
fine.
get.
Yep, good. Thank you.
Yeah, great question. And if you really wanted to get complicated, just like we can nest objects and objects, we can nest if statements in other if statements. So we can say something like, if the first name is Max and the person dot last name equals, and I'm going to intentionally spell my last name wrong here. I'm going to do it with only one T. I'm going to say, don't know him. Else, console log out, smartass. Now when I run that, I still get smartass, but if I change it and add in my second T, I'm going to get that output there. It is, yes, it is just like solving word math problems, logic operators, but we are kind of leveling up our syntax and being able to nest curly braces and curly braces to to get the computer to do only what we want instead of it running all of the code.
So when we nest the if statement inside of another, we started off with if again and end with the single else.
Yep.
Okay. So
And
if
if
there
you
was
wanted
another,
to, you could do additional else if statements in
Okay.
here, or you could even leave this else off if you wanted to, and that would also work.
okay.
Yes, Jen and Natasha, you're right. This is like rows and columns and rows and columns again. We can do additional if statements in here. And this if else is only going to run if this first statement is also true. If this is not true, it's going to ignore everything in here, continue checking off the other if statements, else if statements. And if none of those are true, it's going to run the else. Eva, what's up?
I got the error, cannot access num1 before initialization at object.
So make sure I have a const num1 equals 15 up here
Yeah, I
at
have
the
that
top.
too.
Oh, share your screen.
Okay. Mm. Mm. Can you see it?
Yep. So your error is at line 22. And that is because you've got num1 up here, but you've commented out line 20.
Yeah, because I thought that would confuse it because it was previous, never mind.
It will. So if
'Cause I
you
got that
comment
red
out
line.
30 now, it won't cause the problem.
I'm sorry, say that again.
If you comment out 30,
Okay.
then it won't have an issue. Careful, you're
Yeah, I see that.
the problem is that you commented this out here and then you referenced num1 right here. And so it's like, I don't know what num1 is unless you set it on line 20.
Yeah, but I said it, like I typed out this stuff about with the sarcasm with the connectors.
Yep.
So that was why I thought it should ignore this one up top and then.
But you didn't comment out everything in here. So you were still referencing num1 right here, even though you commented it
Oh.
out there.
Gotcha. Okay, thank you.
No problem. Yeah, if you commented out that whole block of code, then it
Gotcha.
would have worked.
That
But then you ran into the issue where if you commented out the, you can't have two variables declared with the same name with two different values.
Gotcha.
And Mo, that's totally fine about seeing this in a project to make it click. We're just trying to expose you to concepts here. So not a big deal if we're still waiting for this to sink in. That's totally fine. Okay, we are going to move on to we've got two more concepts to cover tonight. Three more. We're going to cover some methods on arrays to modifying an array data. We're going to cover loops, both for loops and while loops. And then we are going to finish up with functions. So let's dive into those.
Share your screen, please.
I wasn't even typing anything yet. Okay, so we are going to start by making an array. And I'm going to make an array of names. And I'm going to load up some names into that array. Now, we already know that we can access a particular name by using our square notation and the index, keeping in mind that our indexes start at 0. So I'm actually at index 0 here, which means Ariel is at index 1. So when I come in and run this, I see that output. Okay, well, what if I want to add on to the list of names? Well, the easiest way to do that is something called the push method. And we've seen this dot notation a couple times. The first time we saw it was in an object when we were trying to access a particular key. We've also seen this dot notation when we are accessing a property on the string. And now we're seeing that same notation used for a function. And this is kind of interesting because if you leave your mouse over it, VS Code is actually trying to help us out a little bit. It tells us that it appends new elements to the end of the array and returns the new length of the array. Okay, well, what if I want to push a new name onto this? So I'm going to push on a new name, and then I can console.log all of the names. And when I take a look in my console, you can now see that Karen has been added to our array.
Wait, what is this thing called? Because I'm taking notes.
Array methods,
Oh,
which are a way to edit the data inside an array. Now, let's say that we want to remove the first item from an array. Well, in order to do that, we shift the array. In other words, we take it and we kind of just shift the whole thing down a little bit to remove the first value. So in order to do that, I can say names.shift. And if I hover over that, it will tell me removes first element from the array. All right, well, to prove that it's working, I'm going to console log out my names again. And what we're going to see is, hey, I added Karen's name to the end by pushing it onto the array. I console logged out the names. Then I shifted the array. In other words, removing my name. And now when I console log it, my name is gone. Those are the two most common methods for working with an array. If you wanted to add an item to the beginning of the array instead of adding it to the end of the array, there are other JavaScript array methods, but I'm not going to do a deep dive on those. That is always a question that you can ask Google, right? JavaScript, how to add item to beginning of the array. And that will tell you the exact method and give you some documentation either at W3 Schools or on Stack Overflow. Shifting the array only deletes the first item in the array, yes. Okay. Correct, Jen. Shifting is shifting the array to the right and dropping the 0 place. In other words, it's just removing out the first item. And it depends on the method, Mo. In this case, because we didn't specify anything, it does remove the first item. Push, on the other hand, because we're adding something to the end of it, it needs to know what we're adding to the end of it. So that is the parameter that we send into the push method so it knows what to add on to the end. But it does depend on the method that you're using. Because sometimes the method may need additional information to know how to work, and that's when we use those parameters between the parentheses. Okay, well, we've got all of our data here. There are 3 different ways we can loop over the data. If you only learn one thing from an array, it is that computers are really bad at processing things in a list. The computer looks at these names and all the computer sees is one array. But we want the computer oftentimes to not only see that list, but to work with individual items in that list. The way that we do that, the way that we tell the computer, hey, work on each one of these items inside the list instead of looking at it as one big thing, is a loop. The way that we use a loop, there are 2 primary kinds of loops in JavaScript, a for loop and a while loop. So let's take a look at those. Natasha, I'm not sure if you can push multiple items in. I believe you can, but you could take a look at the documentation to figure that out. Okay, so we are going to write our first for loop. So we're going to say for, and then we need 3 pieces of information in a for loop. We need what we call an iterator. The iterator is keeping track of the number of times the loop has run. Because our iterator is starting, or because our index is starting at 0, we want our iterator to also start at 0. So we're going to say let I equal 0. That is just like a variable declaration, but it's a variable specific to this for loop. Now, the for loop needs to know how many times this loop is going to run. And so what we're going to do is say, while I is less than names.length. Okay, that's kind of like an if statement, right? If we start it off at 0, then we go and we say, okay, I is 0 less than the length of the array. The length of the array is going to be 1, 2, 3. Okay, if it is, our for loop is going to keep running. We need one last piece of that for loop so it knows how to increment at the end of the loop. In order to do that, we are going to say I plus plus. In other words, add 1 to I every time the loop runs. Then we are going to console.log and we are going to say index number, and we're going to print out I. And then we are going to say name. And this is where we get a little bit fancy. We can access our names array, but we can use the index of I inside our loop. Don't worry, I'm going to go over that in a second. When I run this code, we see index number 0, name Ariel. Index number 1, name Stella. Now, I'm going to show you what happens when we have an infinite loop, just in case you guys run into that. So I'm going to come in here and I'm purposely going to remove the ... So I'm going to save this. I'm going to come down here. I'm going to run this. And whoa, Ariel is causing overload here. What else is new? In order to fix this, because this code is running indefinitely, I'm going to click down in my terminal and I'm going to hit Control C, not Command, Control. Control C is your exit command in the terminal. It's going to tell your computer, stop it. I don't care what you're doing right now. I made a mistake in my code. Just stop executing it. So Control C is like the Control Alt Delete in our terminal. It's going to say stop running that command. So it is possible to write a loop that will run indefinitely. That is called a indefinite for loop, right? And it's just running and running and running, and we don't want that to do that. So when we fix the problem by putting that plus plus back in there, come down here and rerun it, we get the loop running 3 times and it's doing what we want. Okay, so let's take a look at how this for loop is running. What happens here is it says for, and the computer goes, great. That's a keyword. I know I need to loop over something. What the computer first does is it says, okay, I'm going to make a new variable called an incrementer. That is going to start out at 0. It then looks at our logical statement right here, and it says, is 0 less than the length of the names array? Well, the names array up here has 3 names in it. So is 0 less than 3? Yes, it is. So we hold off on the last part of it and we come down into this console log. This console log, it sees a string, so it outputs in index number. Then it gets to I and it goes, wait a second, I is 0. So go ahead and put 0 out here. Okay, another string name. Then it gets to names bracket I. And it goes, okay, I is 0. So what's at the 0 index of our array? Well, because we shifted out my name, the actual first index of the array is going to be Ariel. And so it gets index 0 and puts Ariel's name in here. And because of that, when we look at our loop for the first time, we see index 0 name Ariel. Okay. It hits this curly brace and it goes, okay, now I need to increment I. When we see the I++, what we are seeing is I is now no longer equal to 0. I is now equal to 1. Okay, now we repeat this process. Not 0 anymore. Is 1 less than 3? Yes, it is. So we come down here, we console log out index number. This is now not 0. This is now 1. So we see that index 1 down here. Then we go in, we output the string name, and names is now not looking at 0. It's now looking at 1. What's in the 1 index? That is Stella. So because of that, we now put that all together in our console log, and we see our index 1 and Stella. This is called tracing our code. In other words, we are tracing through what the computer is evaluating in order for us to understand what made this print out 3 times. So we increment I one final time, I becomes 2. We get Karen's name, we print that out. And finally, we increment I. Now 3 is no longer less than 3. So this loop is done running. We've hit the end of the program and we're done with our for loop.
Hey, you lost a few there. I don't know if it was the football playbook, but do you have another way to show it?
So 3 pieces to our for loop. And this is really important. We don't see this kind of for loop anymore because there's actually a simpler for loop. But these for loops are notorious for being quizzed on technical interviews. So that's the reason why we cover these. We've got 3 parts of our for loop plus the part that actually runs the code. We have where our for loop starts. We're starting at 0. We have what the condition is if the for loop should keep running. That's the second part of our for loop. And we have what should happen every time our for loop runs. That is called the incrementer. Finally, whatever code is between the curly braces is what will run every time the loop runs. So 4 parts. First part, we start out at 0. Then we check to see if the second part is true. Is 0 less than the number of items we have in the array? It is. We've got 3 items in the array, and we're starting at 0. So 0 is less than 3. We put the third part on hold, go do whatever is going on in this console log. So what I would suggest is take a look at the output here. Match up this output with the for loop up here. What's happening is this loop is running 3 times because we said start at 0 and keep going while the incrementer is less than the number of items in the array. Ariel is totally right. If this is not clicking for you, There is a probably 10 or 15 different lessons on for loops in Free Code Camp that will build you up to this level. Okay, that's our first for loop. These are really important to understand because whenever we are working with a list of data, we call that an array in JavaScript, we need to be able to tell the computer to work through each item in that array. Because if we don't work through each item, there's no way to deal with the data inside that array. As you guys can imagine, we work with groups of data a lot in programming, right? That's what the computer is good at, taking a massive set of data and being able to run through it quickly. We're going to look at another kind of for loop. This one's a little bit more simple. This is called a for of loop. So what we do is we say for let name of names. And all we're going to do down here is console log out a name is name. So I'm going to come over here. I'm going to run that again. And I see a name is Ariel, a name is Stella, a name is Karen. Okay, what's going on there? This for loop is accomplishing the exact same thing as this for loop up here. The only difference is we don't have an incrementer. So what we're doing is we're taking this array right here, and every time this loop runs, it's going to our names. Our names are right down here. It's taking whatever the first name is here and dumping it into this thing called name. Notice there is a big difference between names with an S and a singular name. Every time this loop runs, it's going down to this array, taking the value and dumping it into name for us. That means when we log out the name here, we are accessing this name right here.
So if it's a number instead of names, do we have to put number?
What you can actually name this whatever you want. So let's come down here and say, let items equal cat, Toyota, and TA. Down here, we could say for let thingy of items console.log thingy. Now, when we come down here and take a look at our output, we get cat, Toyota, and TA. Okay, how does that work? We have items, and whatever comes after that keyword of, look at the color highlighting going on in my screen, right? It's recognizing for, let, and of are special words to JavaScript. That's understanding how JavaScript is reading this item, this array. So what we're doing is we're taking items, looping over all the items in that array, and each time we loop over an item, for this first time it's going to be cat, we put that into thingy. Okay, now what do we want to do every time that it finds a new thingy? Take that thingy and console log it out. Okay, that's the first time this loop runs. The second time this loop runs, we hit the curly brace, we go back up, we get the next item from the array, we drop that into our thingy. Our thingy then console logs out. Then we go up, we get our last item from the array, we dump that into our thingy, the thingy console logs out. And finally, because there are no thingies left in our items array, it is going to stop the loop and only output those 3 items.
So the item is the key and the thingy or whatever you want to name it is whatever the 3 names in there.
Items is the array that we are looping over, and thingy is the index, the value of the index coming out of the
Oh.
array.
Okay.
The code knows that thingy is one of the items from the array because it is preceding the keyword of.
So you can put anything in there and it's always
Correct.
going to, that's pretty much what you're naming those little, okay.
Correct. So naming convention is to use the plural name here, which will be the array, and then use the singular name here. However, you don't have to do that. Here we've got our items and we're getting out thingy from our items. So we are basically saying for every item of our items. And that's why this is called a for of loop, because we are pulling out every item of our array. Plush, what's up?
So if we want an action applied to every single item in an array, we use the bottom for loop. And if we want to restrict it to only some, we use the upper one.
Yeah,
Or-
this for loop gives you more control over I, right? So you could increment this and say, I only want every other item from the array. Then you could add 2 to I and it would skip over items. So this for loop gives you more control, which you sometimes need for writing an equation or dealing with only sections of a data set. However, this for loop we use whenever we want to loop over all the items of an array.
Got it.
So let's just do one final example here, and then we're going to stop here for tonight and pick it up with functions and try catch tomorrow, because I want you guys to play around with this for loop and have a little bit of practice. So I'm going to say let nums equal, and I'm going to say 5, 10, and 20. I would like to divide all of the numbers in my array by 2. In order to do that, I'm going to say for let a num of all my nums. So I am making my array. I know it's an array because I've got my square braces. I'm storing my array in a variable called nums, and I'm separating each item in the array with a comma so that JavaScript can tell those items apart. Now I'm writing my for loop, and I'm saying go over all of the nums. And when you go over all of those nums, take that number and store it in a num. Now, what do I want to do with a num? I want to console.log a num divided by 2. So when I run this code, what output do I get? 2.5510. Why? Because the first time this loop runs, a num is going to be 5. 5 divided by 2 is 2.5. So we go, okay, it's done. Now we go up, and this loop isn't done because we have another number of our nums array. That next number is 10. 10 is going to go into our a num here, and it's going to look at our console log and say 10 divided by 2 is 5. And then it runs that loop one final time. It's taking the 20, it's storing it in a num. A num is now 20 divided by 2 is 10, and that's what we see outputted here.
Were there different names for the second and third kind of for loops?
These for loops are called for of loops, These are called classic for loops or incrementer for loops.
Thank you.
For of is definitely the more popular kind, and there are other kinds of loops. There are while loops. We will learn about a loop type called map once we get to React, but these are the two important kinds to start with. So I'm going to stop new content here, but that does not mean that you are off the hook. Before you head out, I'm not going to make you turn it in, but before you head out, make a new array, write a for of loop, and have it console log it out. Asma, that's a really good question. What I am going to show you is a little bit more advanced. So if you're struggling on this, just plug your ears for a second. Let's say that I only want every other number to be printed out of my for nums loop. So I'm going to add one more thing in here, and I'm going to say for let I equal 0. While I is less than my nums.length, I plus equals 2. Now, every time my for loop runs, instead of adding 1 to I, it's going to add 2 to I. So if I console log out my nums bracket I, the output that I should get here, I'm just going to comment this one out so we can see it better, is 5 and 20. Because we are adding 2 to I every time the loop runs, we are now skipping 10 and 40 in our array and only getting 0 and index 2. Does that answer your question for control? I know that's a dumb example, but it just gives you an idea of that. We could also technically do this in reverse. If we wanted to, we could say let I equal nums.length while I is greater than or equal to 0, I minus minus. And now if we look at the output, we get 40, 20, 10, 5. We actually ran that in reverse. We started with our I, our index at the end of the array, and then worked our way down to get all of those indexes out. So that's an example of a for loop giving you a little bit more control. And yes, Plosh, thank you for adding that. The I plus equals 2 is the same thing as saying I equals I plus 2. I equals I, yes. Okay, so I'm just going to comment this out because that's a little bit more advanced. And I'm going to comment this one out as well. And I'm just going to leave this on the screen. So you're making a new array in your JavaScript. You are writing a for of loop, and you're console logging out each item in that array. And if you have that done, you can head out for the night. If you need help, raise your hand. But this is super important that you get the practice now, right? Because I don't get that. I need to go to free code camp. However, gotta watch because we're gonna get into projects, and all of a sudden, New York Times is going to be around the corner. And guess what you're gonna need for that? You're going to need your for loops to deal with each one of the best-selling books on the list. That list is going to be in an array that we need to process. So loops, super, super important. The good news is there's a light at the end of the tunnel. We are almost done with basic computer science principles. We have one more day of computer science, and then you get Nathan next week teaching you all about DevOps and how to deploy your first website. And when I come back that following Monday, we dive into actually building things with JavaScript. we get past the computer science fundamentals and learn how to apply these concepts directly into a project. Ariel put in the chat that the New York Times is the equivalent of a midterm exam, except it is open book and has no time limit on it. So it's not like we are going to make you all share your screens and hover over you as you are building it. However, New York Times is the first time that we have a project where you know if you're going to make it in the boot camp or not. It is a tough project, but it is where things start clicking. It's that first moment where you go, wow, I built something with real data. It's a real project. I could actually see using this or having my boss ask me to build something like this. So one-on-ones are available. We help you through it. We don't want you to feel stuck on it, but New York Times is not next week. It's not in 2 weeks. It's all the way out at week 12. You're going to learn all about APIs, all the stuff that Jason went over with that open data portal. You're going to get more exposure with that. And then you have an entire week off for 4th of July where you can work on that project. So don't panic. We give you plenty of time to work on it. That's what's coming down the pipeline. But we've got about 19 projects to build between here and there. So you're going to get experience. Allie, not only any word in an array has to be in quotes, but any string, anything that you don't want the computer to evaluate as a command has to be in quotes. Yes. So 3 things that you want to do. You want to make an array and put some items in it. You want to write a for of loop that is basically telling the computer to loop over each item in the array. And you want to console log out the item that you are looping over. Flash, what's up?
I have a question about capstone. Since we are to submit capstone wireframe at the end of the week, should I ask it after class or right now is fine?
We are going to dive into a capstone overview tomorrow. So save that before we do stand up or anything tomorrow. We're going to do an overview on the capstone, how to get ideas, what the requirements are, check-in points throughout the program. All of that stuff's coming down the pipeline. I didn't want to overwhelm you guys with all the resources and then bore you with more capstone talk. So I'm saving that for tomorrow. But thank you for keeping it on the radar.
Thank you.
Max, I had a question here. Can you hear me?
Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, okay. Can I share my screen real quick?
Yeah.
So I get it better, I guess. So you see here, I just made a random thing here, that made a variable my cars. So I put 3 cars here, and then I did. Sorry, what the hell? Oh, sorry, I messed up here. Instead of putting it here, I put it here. Another one. So for let, I was trying to do the other for let. I think, what is it called? So if I put only I here instead of putting anything, it comes with 1, 2, 3, one,
0,
2,
1, 2. Yep.
What does this do? Like, why do we have to put an I again?
Yeah, great question. So every time this loop runs, it's incrementing by 1, right? So what we're doing is basically saying my car's bracket 0, which is going up into the array and looking at index 0. It's taking that Bugatti value and printing it out down here.
So why does it have to be in the square brackets? That's why, because the I is right there without any brackets, but it's printing 1, 2, 3, 1, like 0, 1, 2.
Correct. So the first time this loop runs, I is 0.
Okay.
So we see the 0 right here.
Okay.
Then we take that 0 again, which is in the brackets with I, and we go look up at my cars, which is up here, and we see, hey, what's at index 0? That's Bugatti.
Okay.
So we print out Bugatti down here. Now that console log is done. So we come back up to your incrementer and we add 1 to it. So I is now no longer equal to 0. It is now equal to 1. 1 is still less than the 3 items in your array. So it prints out I again. I is now 1, and we see 1 down here. Now we put 1 into your bracket of I, and we get out the first index from my cars, which is Lamborghini.
Okay.
And so we print out Lamborghini down here. And then we do it one more time. So we are basically using I to keep track of what number time we are on the loop, which we print out here. But then we also use I to access the index from the my cars array.
Okay, got it. I have to just practice a little bit more and read about it, and then it should be good.
Yep.
Okay, damn.
Do the pluses after the I represent how many times that it's gonna run it? Like if we had 5 in the array, then and would we have to put more pluses behind the I for it to keep running?
Yeah, great question. So the second part of the for loop, the I less than my cars dot length, is determining if the loop should keep running. The I++ at the end is telling it what it should do at the end of the loop, at the end of one iteration of the loop, to add on to it next. So we are basically saying we're starting at 0, and we're going to console log out index 0. And then once we do that, how should we move on to the next iteration of the loop? We want to add 1 on to I. And so that's what this I++ is doing, is it's adding 1 on to I, which is 0. So now I is equal to 1, and that's why we see the 1 here and the first index of the array.
So if we wanted to add, like if we had a list of 10 and we wanted to add 5 onto the I, would we need 5 plus signs, or would the
No,
2
you would say
hyphen-
I plus equals 5.
Oh, okay.
I++ is shorthand for saying I plus equals 1.
Okay.
I++ is basically just saying add 1 to it. But if you wanted to add 5 and you only had 10 items in the list, it would print out the first item in the list, the 5th item in the list, and the 10th item in the list.
Okay.
Because we're saying add 5 to it every time, skip over 2, 3, 4, and jump up to 5. Natasha, the node command is node space playground.js, or whatever you named your file. Jen, what's up?
I was just going to share my screen with you, see if I got this right.
Go for it.
Start on 37.
beautiful.
Is
Yep.
that's all 3 steps?
That is, you did an extra one. In addition to the for of, you wrote a classic for loop, which is great. I love the practice.
Okay, so you were just looking for 37 to 41.
Yep.
Okay. I was just trying to make sure I got like I was trying to change it up to make sure I got like the names and put them in the right spots, and
I love it. That's
All
what I
right.
wanted to see, baby. Good
thank you.
work.
And we just appreciate my name going down that index the entire way for like a mile.
Always a troublemaker, aren't you, Ariel? Oh, let me stop your screen share.
I was like, how do I mute it again? I can't find the button.
Stop share loves to hide on you, and it's like always on the desktop that you don't expect it to be on.
All right, can we leave?
Yep. You got your
Alright.
for loop working, head out. You are
Okay.
done. I'm going to stick
Alright.
around just in case anyone wants to review syntax.
Try to get the 30 seconds, please, if you guys have time, just so we can figure out, you know, how you're feeling about it. If we need to slow down, speed up, what's up?
Yo, Allie, if you press and hold the space bar while the chat is closed, it'll unmute you.
I know I switched it off.
Okay, that was when you said that earlier. I was like, that's probably why I kept doing that too.
I'm like, what the heck? All I keep seeing is that I'm being muted. I'm like, but what? I don't remember I'm muted.
Have a good night, y'all.
All right, Max, I'm having a little issue. I wanted to see if you can help me out with it.
Sure, go for it.
So this is where I was trying to, I guess I'm at. I was trying to like, I guess do like a rating, and I had it, and then I don't know what happened.
Okay, your only problem, you're on the right track. You called your array my sneakers, but then you just called it sneakers here.
Oh, right here.
Yep. So if you do my sneakers, that will work. Both versions of the loop should work now. There you go.
Oh, okay, cool. All right. Peace.
Okay, wait. So we always need 2 for loops?
No, only one. The for of is just like a shorthand, and the one that you'll use 99% of the time. That second for loop just gives you more control over how the computer is iterating over it. So it's only one or the other, and the one we'll use most of the time is that for of.
Can you check mine to make sure I'm on the right track?
Yeah, go for it. Yeah, that's perfect. So you can see the output of it, right? We've got 3 different items in our array: kickboxing, running, and walking. And then each one of them printed out as their own console log down here.
Awesome, thank you.
Yeah, good, nice work. Last call for questions tonight.
I just have one. So I think I might be doing something wrong here.
Share your screen.
Okay.
You are missing the comma after crave on line 76. And your for loop looks good. So save and try it and see if that fixes it. And you're good to go.
Okay, thank you. So if I wanted to, sorry, don't mind my notes.
Oh, you're fine. I love seeing those notes.
Okay, let me see. So like if I wanted to do the iteration of this, which is, so this will just tell me, it'll just list all the books here, right? Like the
Correct.
first one.
Yep.
And then like if I do a book of books, so that just calls out, like I'm just naming it whatever But like before then, that's not named, right?
So basically what the for loop is doing is it's giving you access to each individual item in this array.
Oh, sorry.
So let me give you another example. So let's say we want to have our an array of numbers, like, right? So let's say nums and say 2, 5, 10. And let's say for some reason we want to add 2 to each one of those numbers. So we're going to say for let a num of nums. Then we are going to console log out a num plus 2. So if we run that, we see, we see 4, 7, 12. And we're like, okay, that makes sense, right? We just added 2 plus 2 is 4, 5 plus 2 is 7, 10 plus 2 is 12. Okay, we can just say that loop adds 2 to each one of the numbers. But in order to really understand it, you have to think like the computer is thinking. So what the computer is doing is it's taking nums2 and it's looping over each one of the items and it's storing that item in a num. So a num is now equal to 2. We take a num, which is equal to 2, and we add 2 to it, and that's where we get 4. Then we aren't done with all the items in the array. So we go back up to nums2, we take 5, we store 5 in a num. A num 5 plus 2 is 7, so that's what we log out. So what the for loop is doing is instead of looking at this as one big hunk of numbers, it's giving us access to each individual number, and that's why we can add 2 to it.
Okay.
If we tried to do this instead, if we just said nums console log nums plus 2, it's going to look at us and be like 2, 5, 10, 2, right? Because it's an array. We didn't tell it, hey, these are 3 individual numbers that I want you to add 2 to. So what we have to do is tell it, hey, go through and for each item of the array of numbers, add 2 to each item inside of it.
Okay. Let me see. Am I okay? Okay, so I am unmuted. All right. So when we use the I, so the I is just another way of doing this exact same thing.
Yes.
Okay,
The
but
only
it's just
difference
like,
is the I gives you more control. So this for loop is forcing you to run over all of the items in the array. And most of the time we want to do that anyway. But sometimes we want to skip over items in the array, or we may only want to go through the first 25 items in the array. And in order to do that, we need that other for loop type, which is giving us more control over where we are starting the loop, how many times the loop is going to run, and how many times we want to increment that loop.
okay, yeah. So I get the basic for loop. The one that I'm like having the confusion with is the second one. So if we just wanted to do something to 2 and 5 in nums2, will we use the second for loop?
Yeah, great question. Yes, we would. So we're going to say let I equal 0 because we want to start the loop at 0, while I is less than 2 I plus plus.
Okay.
Then we can console log out our our nums2 bracket I. So if we run that, we only see 2 and 5. We don't see 10.
Okay. And now, so it's only listing that because you have it like the way that it says. So like, let's say if you wanted to multiply that stuff, would you switch? Would you just switch out? Ah, okay. So you don't do anything to the let part, to the inside the parentheses of the for loop.
This is controlling how many times the loop runs. This is controlling the output of the loop.
Okay. I see. Now, when we did the one that was like it was I, comma, nums, and then it had the other I, like what's that for? Let me see if I can find a line of code that okay, let me see. I'll type it. So it's like and then there's like an I here.
Oh, okay. Yeah. So what I did is I did this. I said something like this loop has run I and then num of loop run. Let me just do it like this. Multiply. And then this should be nums. So if I run this, now this loop has run 0 and the result of the multiplication is 10. Then the loop runs again. I is now 1 and the result of the multiplication is 25.
All right, okay, I think I understand it. All right, sorry. I didn't know if you heard me when I said
No, I did. I was just letting your brain kind of process. I saw the gears turning.
All right. Okay, so I get the plus. That's just we just have the plus because like we're just running through it like by one, right?
Correct.
All right.
So let's just do one more example here. Let's add in like 2 more numbers. And say now we're going to add 2. We're going to add 2 every time this loop runs. So I'm going to try and build a visualization for this. So we start at 0, right? 0 is the number 2 in the array. So we're going to see this loop has run 0, multiply, and then it's going to get 0 from our array, which is 2, and multiply it by 5. So we're going to see this exact output. Now we're going to add 2 to I. So we're not going to go to 1. We're going to go straight up to index 2. So we're going to get the output 0 to 4. And then we're going to see 10, 50, 200 because we picked 2, 10, and 40 out of the array.
Okay. It feels like some weird, like, I don't know, like for some reason it's so, I don't know why I'm having it's not really a hard time understanding because like I get the concept because it reminds me of like math and how you said it, like I get plugging the stuff in and like how the computer is doing it. I don't know why. I don't know. Maybe I'm just overcomplicating it for myself in a different kind of way. Cause like I get it, but then it's like when I go to write it, it's just I don't know.
I mean, part of that will come with practice, but the hardest part is thinking through it like the computer is thinking through it. And if you can get to that point of being like, all right, why is 1 not showing up for this loop has run section? Well, that's because we ran it the first time, right? And it was at 0. And 0 is less than the number of items in the array. So we log this whole thing out. Now we're adding 2 to I. Well, I was 0. Now I is now 2. 2 is less than the total number of items we have in this array. So we're going to log out 2, and then whatever is in our second index is going to log out, which is why we see 2 and 50 down here.
Sorry, I forgot I turned off the space bar muted. So so okay, I feel like I get it now. So like the for let a num of num, so like that you're just going in there and it's just pulling out.
Exactly.
Okay, yeah, all right, I get it. Okay. Alrighty. Okay, yeah. So I'll try some more tonight and then like see, but I'll make sure I'll like rewatch this little snippet that we have in here. That's why I'm asking these questions so I can come back.
Very good. That's why I'm here.
Okay, thank you.
Have a good night.
You too, bye.